She climbed the steps slowly. She was only 22 years old. She wore a white dress, her hair pulled back. She was surrounded by a silent crowd, and at the top of the stairway, the blade already awaited her. It was the 11th of September, 1599, in Rome. And Beatrice Cenci, young, noble, beautiful, was about to lose her head. But why? For being too beautiful? For being a woman? Or for daring to defy a monster? This is not a story of war. It is not a story of politics. It is a story of power, of silence, and of a woman who paid with her blood for being born into the wrong house. Because Beatrice was not merely the victim of a sentence, she was the portrait of injustice in her time. And what you are about to hear is as real as it is cruel. To understand this execution, we must return to the beginning, to the Cenci mansion, one of the wealthiest and most influential surnames in Rome, a palace that concealed horror behind marble facades, and a father named Francesco, a man feared even by his own servants. Francesco Cenci was not merely wealthy, he was powerful. He controlled fortunes, lands, and titles. But there was something rotten in that family, something the neighbors whispered about, something the servants knew, but that no one dared speak aloud. Francesco had an obsession, and that obsession had a name: Beatrice, his own daughter. She was born in 1577, in a Rome where being a woman was already a condemnation. Being a woman and beautiful, even worse. Being a woman beautiful and the daughter of Francesco Cenci, a curse. Because Francesco did not see Beatrice as a daughter. He saw her as a possession, a piece of property, and he treated her as such. Beatrice's early years were spent in a gilded prison. She grew up surrounded by silks and jewels, but without freedom. Francesco kept her isolated in the palace, away from the world's eyes. Why? Because he knew her beauty would attract suitors, and Francesco did not want to share Beatrice with anyone. When she turned 15, the situation became unbearable. Francesco began to show an interest that went beyond paternal. He would enter her chambers without warning. He would watch her while she dressed. He made comments about her body that left Beatrice terrified. And when she tried to resist or complain, Francesco used his absolute authority to silence her. But what exactly was happening in that house? The servants spoke of screams coming from Beatrice's chambers during the night. They spoke of locked doors, of constant tears, of a young woman who was losing her sanity. Francesco had transformed his own daughter into a prisoner in her own home. Beatrice tried to seek help. She wrote secret letters to relatives, begged servants to carry messages outside the palace. But who would believe a young woman against the word of one of Rome's most powerful men? Francesco had influence in the Vatican, enough money to buy silence, and the law on his side. After all, he was the patriarch. Beatrice was merely his daughter. The situation worsened when Francesco decided it was time for Beatrice to marry, but not to just any man, to someone he could control completely, someone who would not question the strange conditions of such a marriage. Francesco wanted to keep Beatrice close, even after marriage. He wanted to continue having access to her. It was then that Beatrice met Olimpio Calvetti, a young soldier who worked at the family castle. Olimpio was different from the other men Francesco brought around. He was gentle, respectful, and genuinely cared about Beatrice. For the first time in years, she felt there was someone who saw her as a person, not as an object. The romance between Beatrice and Olimpio was secret, but intense. They met in dark corridors, exchanged hidden letters, planned a future far from that prison. Olimpio promised Beatrice he would take her away from that house, that he would protect her from Francesco. But Francesco discovered their relationship. Francesco's reaction was explosive. He immediately dismissed Olimpio, forbade Beatrice from leaving her chambers, and increased surveillance over her. Worse still, He began punishing her in ways that left Beatrice in complete despair. She realized she would never be free as long as Francesco was alive. That was when the plan was born. Beatrice, together with her stepmother Lucrezia and her brother Giacomo, began conspiring against Francesco. It was not just about freedom, it was about survival. Francesco was destroying everyone's life in the family, and they knew the situation would only worsen. The plan was simple but dangerous. During a trip to the family's rural castle, they would hire assassins to eliminate Francesco. They would make it look like an accident. They would say he fell from the balcony during the night. No one would question the death of such a hated man too closely. September of 1598. The Cenci family was at Petrella Castle, far from Rome. It was the perfect opportunity. During the night, two men entered Francesco's room. He tried to scream, but was quickly silenced. Within minutes, Francesco Cenci was dead. The tyrant who had terrorized his family for decades had finally met his end. But here lies the problem. Francesco Cenci had enemies throughout Rome. He had debts, disputes, political conflicts. Anyone could have had motives to kill him. Why did they immediately suspect the family? Why did Beatrice become the primary suspect? The answer is simple and cruel. Because she was a woman. Because she was beautiful. And because Pope Clement VIII needed an example. Rome was full of powerful families who thought they were above the law. The Pope wanted to show that no one, not even a beautiful young woman from a noble family, could commit crimes and escape unpunished. The investigation was a farce. The interrogators used brutal methods to extract confessions. They tortured servants until they confirmed whatever version the investigators wanted to hear. And when they reached Beatrice, they had already decided she was guilty. Beatrice was imprisoned, along with her entire family. For months, they remained in damp, dark cells, awaiting a trial whose outcome was already predetermined. The Pope had decided the Cenci family would be an example for all of Rome. They would all be executed. But why did Beatrice specifically become the focus of all attention? Why did the posters of the time always show her face? Why did all of Rome speak of her beauty before even mentioning her alleged crimes? The answer is disturbing. Because Beatrice's beauty was troubling. In a society controlled by old powerful men, a beautiful young woman who dared to defy paternal authority was a threat. The trial was theater. Beatrice tried to defend herself, explained the years of suffering, described the abuse she endured at Francesco's hands, but none of it mattered. The judges did not want to hear about Francesco's atrocities. They only wanted to confirm Beatrice's guilt. When the sentence was read, all of Rome was shocked, not by Beatrice's guilt, but by the cruelty of the punishment. A 22-year-old woman would be publicly beheaded. Her brother Giacomo would be tortured before execution. Only the youngest son was spared, for being underage. In the days leading up to the execution, something strange happened in Rome. The people began to mobilize. Nobles, merchants, even clerics began pleading for mercy for Beatrice. They said she was too young, that she had suffered enough, that the punishment was disproportionate to the crime. But Pope Clement VIII did not yield. He had decided that Beatrice Cenci would be an example, and nothing would change his mind. In fact, Beatrice's popularity only reinforced his determination. He could not allow a criminal to become a popular heroine. The 11th of September, 1599. The Sant'Angelo Bridge was packed. Thousands of people came to witness Beatrice Cenci's execution, some out of morbid curiosity, others out of compassion. Many hoped that, at the last minute, papal pardon would arrive. Beatrice appeared dressed in white, like a bride. Her hair was pulled back, her face serene. She did not cry, did not beg. She walked with a dignity that impressed even her executioners. When she reached the scaffold, she said a silent prayer and knelt. The executioner hesitated. They say his hands trembled. Executing such a beautiful young woman who had suffered so much seemed wrong even to a man accustomed to death. But the orders were clear. With a swift movement, the blade fell. Beatrice Cenci was dead. The crowd fell silent. There were no shouts of approval, as was common at executions. There was only a heavy silence, as if all of Rome knew it had witnessed an injustice. In the following days, flowers mysteriously appeared at the execution site. The people had transformed Beatrice into a martyr. But the question remains: was Beatrice truly guilty? Did she participate in the plan to eliminate Francesco? Or was she merely a convenient victim of a system that needed a scapegoat? The evidence is contradictory. The testimonies were obtained under torture, and the political pressure was enormous. What we know for certain is that Francesco Cenci was a monster. Historical records confirm his abuse, his cruelty, his sick obsession with his own daughter. If Beatrice participated in his death, it was in self-defense. If she did not participate, she died unjustly accused. The story of Beatrice Cenci spread throughout Europe. Poets wrote about her. Painters portrayed her tragic beauty. Writers transformed her life into legend. She became a symbol of the struggle against oppression, of feminine resistance against patriarchy, of the injustice of absolute power. But perhaps the true tragedy is not even her death. It is the fact that, more than 400 years later, stories like Beatrice's still happen. Women are still punished for their beauty, still silenced by misogynistic systems, still pay with their lives for daring to defy powerful men. Beatrice Cenci died at 22 years old. Her beauty was her curse, her courage was her crime, and her youth was wasted by men who saw women as property. She was beheaded not for being guilty, but for being inconvenient, not for being a criminal, but for being too free for the standards of her time. The blade that severed her head on that September day also severed the innocence of an era. Rome learned that even the purest beauty, the most radiant youth, could be destroyed by the cruelty of power. And we, more than 4 centuries later, still remember Beatrice not as the criminal they wanted her to be, but as the victim she always was. Her death was not justice. It was merely another demonstration that, when it comes to women, society always finds a way to transform victims into villains. Beatrice Cenci paid with her life for being born beautiful in a time when that was crime enough.